Hello, Java Challenger. I'm very happy that I have here Josh Long. Josh Long is a Java champion with over 20 years of experience in the software development industry. He's also a Spring developer advocate at Broadcom. He worked for Pivotal and many other amazing companies in the software industry. He's the author of 6 books and contributes to several open source projects, including Spring Boot, Spring Integration, Spring Cloud, Activity, and Vaadin. He's a worldwide speaker and also runs the Bootful podcast, where he speaks with Spring experts. And I'm fully sure you're going to learn a lot about Spring by listening to his podcast. And he also lives in San Francisco. So, Josh, I'm very happy to have you here. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Very
Nice
good.
to meet
Thank you
you, my
so
friend.
much. Yeah, I really like your view. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. It's a beautiful day in San Francisco. Beautiful day by the bay.
Amazing. Josh, we're going to be talking about your career and, any insights, any career challenge you overcame and how to help Java developers to become better. Because nowadays it's so difficult. There's so much to learn. And, developers really struggle with focus and they are overwhelmed with so many technologies they have to learn. They feel anxious. So there are so many problems nowadays. Like it's good that we have so much information, but the downside is that we get overwhelmed very easily. So I'd like to talk to you about, those challenges you went through. And I'm also very curious to know about your career trajectory. So can you share a little bit about how was your career trajectory? What was the main challenges? How you overcame them?
Sure. I was very lucky. I got put into a bunch of small startups very early on. And, when you're at a startup, nobody cares what you specialize in. You wear many hats. I would not say that I recommend this. I would just say that I was very lucky to get a lot of experience doing a little bit of everything. And so I helped with installing servers and setting up databases and wearing a pager, but I also helped write the code and also helped integrate with other systems and just everything, IT, whatever. And it's very stressful to do that. It's bad for your health to do that much work with that much pressure at a single place. But the result was I was lucky enough to sort of get a feel for a lot of different things when I started working back in 2002. And as a result, I just felt comfortable. Nothing scared me a lot. I had a friend who helped me to start using Linux as my full-time desktop back in 2002, right? And nowadays I use Mac, but for a decade I used Linux exclusively. And I had been comfortable with Linux before that and with Unix before that, but I didn't know really how to use it as my primary desktop. So that experience of being in that meat grinder, that very tough environment, I think was very useful for me. And then as a result, I had a number of different companies that reached out to me just through word of mouth. They invited me to come work for them or with them to build things. And so I got very much into the space of systems and distributed systems and services and all that. And so I spent a lot of time building things and, had some successes and some losses. That's something that any of the young people watching this should know, is that it's not going to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect in this industry. Anyway, eventually I realized that I was trying to build interesting things quickly, right? And I was using Java. Java was the thing you were supposed to use for building distributed systems and all that back then. And I discovered this thing called Spring. And the reason I liked Spring is because it made me feel like I wasn't stupid. I was using Java at the time, and it's gotten much better now. Okay, this is not today, but I'm saying back then there were some other technologies that people were using in Java to build remote services and things like this, and they were just very painful. They just required 7 different classes to do one service method, and we had this technology called EJB docklet, which you could use to code generate. And obviously, it's not like that today, but it was 25 years ago, just a very hard situation. And so I started using Spring because it made me feel like, okay, I can move quickly. I'm at a startup. I don't have time to sit there and pay for 7 different golf game vendors to come in and lecture me on how to use their $1 million product. We just have to ship, we just have to ship. It was very much sort of what allowed me to get done something very quickly. And so Spring was good with that. Spring was really good at that. It was just sort of open source. You just used it, create a few objects, and off you go. And so I kept that in my tool belt, starting as early as like 2003, 2004. And in the early days, I couldn't use all of it. As you know, Raphael, there a lot of the big technologies, a lot of the most impactful technologies, they come with lessons that you must learn to understand why those technologies are big. And for example, if you're doing batch processing, there's a whole domain you have to learn about. If you're learning about AI, there's a whole domain you have to learn about. If you're doing security, there's a whole domain. So there's theoretical and there's the applied. And so with Spring, I was able to start learning this core foundational layer, but I had to understand the domain of dependency injection and aspect-oriented programming and all that. Nowadays, everybody understands this stuff. It's easy. It's just obvious. You can't build software in the large without doing these things. Even the JavaScript frameworks understand this stuff. There's dependency injection and that kind of stuff there as well. That was very interesting for me. And eventually I started getting very happy with, my use of Spring grew. And in around 2006, they started doing other projects based on the foundational layer of Spring, right? They had Spring Batch and Spring Security, and then Spring Integration, and all these other things that built upon this core knowledge that I had built. So I had one component model, and those skills, they took me to different places. They allowed me to solve more problems without having to learn a whole bunch of new component models. I just had to take the existing component model, marry it with the new domain, and now I could solve problems in that domain. And so eventually I started to become a big fan. I even started contributing back to some of this stuff, sending pull requests. Open source, most valuable lesson I can give anybody is, where software is a team sport, and there's no better way to be on a team than to work in open source. And eventually I wrote books, I was doing conferences, and, the Spring team reached out to me and said, hey, you want to come in out of the cold? Basically, we'll pay you to do what you're already doing with your own time and dime. And I said, that'd be great. And I officially joined after a bit of a hiring freeze. There was a hiring freeze. They interviewed me and gave me the job. Well, basically gave me the job. They couldn't officially. And then I joined in 2010, finally. It took a little while, like a year.
That's something very interesting, because you were sharing your knowledge because you want it, because it is your passion, but you weren't being paid for that.
No.
But the interesting thing is that...
But it's very valuable to me.
It's very valuable, but
yeah.
It's also amazing that it was pivotal, right? Pivotal.
This is another thing that's very interesting. By the way, they say the key to mastery is teaching, right? If you want to know something very well, teach it, and you'll discover all the gaps in your knowledge. And that was true for me. That teaching was not just about helping others. Certainly that's a big part of it, but it was to help enrich my own knowledge of the thing, So I interviewed with the Spring team, who were at the time part of a company called SpringSource, and they were acquired, right? I was talking to the Spring team. Then they were acquired by a company called VMware. And when I finally joined, I joined VMware, right?
Oh.
And so that was after they were acquired. I joined VMware, and then VMware, we were there for 3 years, I think. And then our then CEO, Paul Moritz, brilliant man, he was the person who was the CEO of VMware. He said, let's create a new, smaller company focused on app development. So VMware is virtualization, infrastructure, operations. It's the most widely used technology in the data center. It's everywhere, right? But the new wave will be at the application layer, delivering value for application developers. So let's focus on that. And we spun out this new company called Pivotal. And, Pivotal was Cloud Foundry, RabbitMQ, Green Plum, Gemfire, Spring, just all sorts of stuff, right? Lots of developer-focused, move fast, deliver quickly kind of technologies, right? Open source, also. Open source everywhere, right? And then Pivotal was for 6 or 7 years, and then around 2019 or 2020, we were a public company, and we had a good market and a good ecosystem, and so VMware bought Pivotal back, right? So we rejoined the mothership, so to speak, And we were part of VMware for, what is it now? I don't know, 2023 or 24, I forget, but it's 3 or 4 years. And then Broadcom bought VMware. So it's lots of, my paycheck has come from many different companies over the last 15 years, but I have had exactly the same title, Spring Developer Advocate. I was the very first one, and I will, I love this. I love the work. I love the community. I love the people. And, I'm very happy there. My title has not changed. I don't want it to change, but, obviously the learning has grown all the time because now there's all these new technologies with which to work, and Spring connects me to those technologies.
Wow. I didn't know that Spring has like such a history. Like
Yeah.
with so many companies, companies acquiring each other. That's so
Yeah, yeah.
interesting.
Lots of things come and go, but Spring is forever. Well, at least I hope it is, like Spring is just this wonderful technology. It solves the problems of today faster than everything else. So it's always staying relevant, and, it's not today's Spring. If you take the code you wrote in Spring Framework 1.0 in 2004, take those jars from Spring Framework 1.0, replace them with Spring Framework 6.0, and then run the program, it'll still work, right? We do a very good job of maintaining backwards compatibility, but we layer on new capabilities on top. And so that means that the total body of things that you need to understand to work with Spring in 2024, if you want to understand all of it, is more than it was back in 2004, for example, or 2025, I guess is where we are now.
Yeah, Spring is wonderful. I love it. I love the mindset of simplicity and, the way to create your code based on convention instead of doing lots of configurations. It makes life so easy and it's so robust. Like Spring can do so many things. Like it can create such a robust microservice with Spring.
Right.
Like it's not for no reason that Spring has, I pretty much sure that more than 80% of the market.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I've heard other numbers that are higher, but I don't know. No, that's the thing. It's very hard to be 100% sure because it's open source. Like I don't know. There's no way to guarantee. But as you know, right, Maven Central and other things are just who knows. We don't know. We don't know.
Yeah.
But it's growing. That's the nice thing, and it does that only because it stays competitive, right? It has to keep staying competitive. It cannot. We cannot just rest.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you started giving talks in conferences. Do you remember how was the start? Because it's always very hard for developers, right? For me, it was very difficult to start giving talks. Like I was in front of everyone and I had to, share my knowledge and make sure my session was valuable. Got very nervous. How was your start?
Same.
Because, that's very hard for developers to do.
It's great for all people. It's hard for all people to do this. And the reason is we are biologically designed, our lizard brain, our reptile brain, it tells us to be scared when a bunch of creatures that you don't know or recognize are staring at you, right? That means you're about to get eaten, usually, right? So our brain says, oh, all these people are staring at me, run, right? Fight or flight. It's very stressful for the brain to be surrounded by a bunch of people you don't know. And that's called stage fright today, right? But it's a primal thing. It comes from before we were even modern humans, And yeah, it's hard for everybody to overcome this. The people that overcome it, you got to wonder what happened to them, are they maybe like sociopaths or psychopaths? I don't know. Maybe they're a little different. They can turn off the fundamental core part of their brain and give a presentation, ignoring their basic instincts, That's crazy. That's like, I don't know, those people. So yeah, it's hard for everybody to do that. That's okay though, And the other problem that I had was, I was already a CTO by the time I started doing public presentations. I'd already done, I'd already been on top of technological discussions and all that. One-on-one is very different, or even a small group is very different from a large audience. And from the elevated perspective, there's value in driving home the essence of what you're trying to do, even if the essence of what you're trying to do is very complicated. But from the teaching perspective, from giving a talk on stage, doing the complicated thing, even if you explain it simply, is a good way to lose people. It's not going to appeal to everybody. You know what I'm saying? You want to focus on things that will appeal to lots of people, and then work your way towards a specific goal. And one of the problems that I had was I would do these talks that were super interesting to me because they were there's this technology here and there's that technology there, and they are very powerful by themselves. What if we combine them? Well, now you've got 5 people in the world that care, This is a niche technology, this is niche, and now you take them together, the overlap is like one person besides me, And nobody wants to go to this very specific talk. And, you find ways to connect the big picture to a very specific thing, but you have to I had to learn to scale it back and put my feet in the shoes of somebody who's just starting their journey with technology. And one thing that has worked very well for me is to always start from zero. Every single presentation I do starts with no pre-written code. I don't have existing, there's nothing running already, no rabbits up my sleeves. I start from zero. So by definition, every single one of my talks is a beginner talk, even if by the end of the talk, you can be an expert in something, but I start from zero. And that has been very useful for me to be a better presenter it forces me to think about the journey. Like it may seem at the end, if I'm at the expert level of something, and I'm not the expert at everything, nobody is, but if I'm an expert at one level and I feel very comfortable at that level dealing with the technology, I know how to get to that expertise level of sophistication very quickly, but I cannot forget how hard it is to go from beginning to expert in the first place. You know what I'm saying? I can do, now that I know all this stuff, A, B, and C, as an expert, I can do something very cool with it very quickly. But how long does it take to get from zero to expert? If you don't think about that journey from zero to expert, then you're going to leave people behind. And it might not be worth the cost. For me, the cost of doing something interesting as an expert is nothing because I already know all this stuff. But that's not what people who are starting off will feel. They'll feel like the cost is just this, it's Mount Everest of complexity, right? Before they can even begin to have the conversation at the expert level. And so I spent a lot of time as a public speaker learning how to scale back, think about the people at the base of the mountain and learning how to carry them with me up to the mountain, and that's difficult to do as well. And that's another one of those things where we just talked about you learn through teaching, right?
Yeah, and that's the mindset of an amazing speaker, because you just, you don't go there and just give your talk and you don't care about people. You actually have empathy.
Try to, yeah. I think it's important. Very important.
Yeah. And the other thing is that you are aware of the curse of knowledge.
Yes. Great way to put it.
So
Yes, exactly.
that's very important because sometimes we think, oh, but I know this thing here and I'm pretty much sure everyone knows that. So you can't assume, can't assume your audience knows everything. And I think it's fantastic the way you give your talks because you make it simple and, you take a beginner through the journey. And, the beginner will understand a lot better the subject you introduced on your talks.
Thank you.
I really like that.
That's a great way to explain it. I'm going to steal that from you. The curse of knowledge. That's a great point. I say that I start from the very beginning. I don't teach people how to write Java code, right? Like I assume they know Java or some basics of Java. Sometimes I'll show very specific features in Java and I'll explain that because, it's new or it's unique or special or whatever. But, the people that can also start from that absolute baseline zero, that's the most difficult, right? If you can start from, I assume you know nothing about even basic programming concepts. If you can go from that to, hey, at least you know how to write code that compiles and it works and you have a basic idea of the concepts, that's the hardest thing to do. That's why I love, and people love Dr. Subramaniam, Dr. Venkat Subramaniam, he's the ultimate teacher, right? He's able to go from absolute zero to something useful. Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I love Venkat's talks, and it's always the same, right? In every conference, his talks is going to be always packed because he's so good. in his talks that, I don't know, he has, this true talent with hard work. It's insane.
yeah.
His level on his talks is just
Right.
unbelievable.
The best,
Unbelievable.
the top of the best of the best. That's
The
why.
best. Yeah.
Yeah. Doctor.
Yeah, Dr. Suramani. My huge respect for him.
By the way, he's
Eh,
one of the, he's never ever. I don't think I've ever seen him even advertise that he's a PhD. I don't think he cares. But I give him as much respect as I can. I'm such a big fan.
Me too, definitely. Yeah. Um, okay, so you worked for a startup. It's very hard, right?
Any,
I also worked for kind of a startup, and like I had to wear so many hats.
yes.
I had to be the architect, had to be the project owner, had to do meetings with other teams. I had to, code. I had to take care a little bit of the infrastructure. So it was a lot of work. It's
Also, make sure the
overwhelming.
lights are off and the lease is paid for. Just everything. Especially it's very small companies. Yeah.
Yeah, but you learn so much. So it's good, but it's so much work.
Oh yeah. And I don't think it's healthy. And especially today, there's even more to learn. And I don't think at this point it's reasonable to expect a person to do that. I think college is more useful than ever because it'll give you exposure to a broad swath of things. Because a good technologist does not focus on one thing. They will learn, il uomo universale, the Renaissance man, or the Renaissance person is not just one focused thing. They should learn as much as they can, then focus if they want. But at least know what you don't know, learn breadth, then depth,
Interesting. That's a very good concept because I want to go deeper into this topic,
Mhm.
but I have other questions before.
Sure.
So you mentioned about your career transition, and it's very interesting. And I want to know if you planned this career transition.
No, no, I did not. I was a contributor to a bunch of little projects, but Spring Integration was the one I was working on the most from outside the company as a separate, individual contributor. And the lead of the project at the time was this gentleman named Mark Fisher, who I adore. And he messaged me he messaged me over Skype, and oh, you saw the news, Skype is being shut down. So he messaged me over, I know, so sad. They should have shut down Teams. Why Skype? Keep Skype. Um, anyway, they messaged me over Skype and he said, hey, we've got this new as a developer advocate. And I'm like, what's that? I don't know what that is. Is that what James Ward does? Is that what is that the same thing as an evangelist? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know. And I was like, he said, yeah, sort of. And he said, would you be interested? That doesn't sound like it's for me. No, and I walked away I said, thanks. But I walked away from the computer to go get some coffee. And then I thought, I was like, wait, what am I saying? It's the spring team. Of course I'll take it. I'll take it. So I ran back and I said, I'll take it. 5 minutes later, I'm like, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it. Don't give it to somebody else, And yeah, anyway, thanks to him, I got that job. But that wasn't part of my trajectory at all. It was a complete shift. It's a different skill set, it's good to be a good technologist, but it is not the most valuable skill when it comes to being an advocate, or an evangelist or whatever they call it. It's good to have a good grounding in technology. Surely you need some of that, but you don't need to be, you know what I'm saying? You don't have to be the best to do that. In fact, quite the opposite, because sometimes people who are earlier on in their journey, they can better remember the pain that people who are still starting feel. So for me, again, like I said, I had this trouble as an advocate where I started in the very beginning, my talks started too high. I forgot what it feels like to be a beginner. It had been so long already for me that I couldn't empathize with, like you said, to use the language you used earlier. I couldn't empathize with the people who are the beginner. And so it made me a bad advocate. Even though I was a very good technologist, I was not a very good advocate. And it's only when I started I had a few talks that were not very good. And I started to realize, okay, I have to make an effort here. I have to go back. I have to think about the beginner story. So yeah, I wasn't planning on doing it. And in fact, maybe I did myself a disservice by going as far down one trajectory and then switching to another. Maybe I should have done the cutover earlier, but that's okay. I eventually got it basically sorted out.
Awesome. So what was your main motivation to give talks and contribute to open source projects?
You get better, right? I mean, open source is free mentoring, right? Free. You get to work. I got to work with Rod Johnson and Jurgen and Dr. Dave Sire and these amazing people and Mark Fisher. Like I said, Mark Fisher is just all these amazing people that you could not pay. You could not pay in the real world enough money to get a chance to sit there and have them correct you on your code and work with them, right? They don't do consulting, but if they did, it would be thousands of dollars. It'd just be the most money ever. I can't afford that. But if I contribute open source and I send helpful code, or at least I try to send helpful code to their projects, I get to work with them for free. I mean, that's better for me, and it's better for me. It's a lot better for me. They get some value, but I get the most value, And the same is true for all open source projects. Obviously, there's really skilled people who drive these projects, that know the details of this domain and this technology. And to get a chance to sit there and learn from them you cannot pay for that. There's no way to buy that anywhere, And so that's why it helped me grow.
Yeah, I really like the way you think because, like you said, it's free mentoring, like from the giants of technology. So it's so cool. So cool. Like how much you learn contributing to open source projects. Can you, for free? Yeah.
I mean, you have to give your time, but that's, you're going to do open source and you'll get a lot from it, or you'll sit on your couch and watch TV. You'll get nothing from it. So you have only 24 hours a day. People say your time costs money. That's true. But unless you've got something that will give you a bigger value than that, then this is still free, right? And if you don't have something that'll give you a bigger value than that, then then you've actually wasted, time doing something else. So it's much better to do open source if you have, nothing else that is more valuable, I think.
Exactly. How would you suggest Java developers to start contributing to Spring? Because it's not easy, right? Spring is it is actually the most popular framework in the world. And
one of them, yeah.
So I ask you, what is your suggestion for developers to start contributing to Spring?
There's, two sides to this. The first and most obvious answer to your question is most of our GitHub projects, we're github.com/spring-projects or github.com/spring-cloud. That's all of it, right? Everything is there.
Nice.
And you can go there and find everything. And a lot of these projects, many of these projects will have GitHub issues with a tag, ideal for contribution or for beginners or, whatever. We tag them. These are issues that we want you, young and aspiring developer, to leave a comment saying, hey, I'd like to try this. And then somebody on the Spring team will mentor you. We'll help you work through this project. It's not a hard issue. It's an issue that we could do in 10 minutes, or whatever. It's not a big issue. It's a chance for somebody else who wants to learn and to participate to do that. So that's the technical, how do you do what you asked? But I would remind people committing to Spring is not a goal. Solving this problem or that problem, that's a goal, right? Don't just put on your New Year's resolution, I want to contribute to the open source Spring project, or to contributing by itself doesn't get you anything. Getting a chance to learn or to contribute or to help or whatever, that's more valuable. So if you have a goal, we talk about you have to have an itch. You have to scratch your own itch. What is your itch? If you don't have an itch, then it's very strange to just start scratching it, I don't know. You get so many people who are they spam, it's not just us, it's all open source projects. So we get a lot of people saying, I'd like to contribute. Well, we can't, we can't point you in the direction that's best for you, How do you want to help? What would be useful for you? What is your goal, But yeah, we welcome, we have lots of projects with lots of different issues, and we're not the only ones. There's actually lists of open source projects out there that you can go find that have these. They're different tags. They're not the same tag for all projects, but basically they're the same idea, right? And all the major projects do this. If you feel like you want to help and you feel like you have an idea on how to do it, and you want to learn and be a part of this process, we welcome you, of course. But also don't just do it because it's good for your resume. Do it because you feel like you can be a part of it.
Yeah, there are lots of benefits. Like a developer, you get a lot better technically. They will contribute the biggest framework
Right.
in the world, so robust, and you're gonna be coding with the best,
Yeah.
right? So it is invaluable.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more.
And it's also and obviously the developer can't go there asking, oh, how can I contribute? So it's basically, you are a developer, right? You are a developer. So if you are a developer, you can figure it out. So it's important to have the mindset of not waiting for someone to tell you the direction, because like Josh said, you can go to the Spring project. You can look, if you're a beginner, look for the beginner tag and see what you can do.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I got my job because I contributed to open source. And several, almost all of us on the Spring team, we started by being external contributors. Almost all of us. Yeah, it's just an endless list of people, but including like the lead of Spring Cloud is Spencer. He was an external contributor. Me, but even all the, Rod and Jurgen and those original people, when they saw people that were contributing in the early days, they hired them as well, right? Like it's a great way to get noticed as well, to endear yourself. And that's why they say, and by the way, I'm going to say something, but also remember, this is not the universal truth, but I'm saying using your GitHub as a resume is pretty useful, but don't let companies tell you that they won't hire you unless you have a GitHub full of activity, because a lot of people do amazing work that isn't public and open source, and that's fine. And they should not be held against you. But if you do happen to have it, it does make, you can imagine, it makes it a lot easier to understand what this person can do, because you can just look,
Yeah, that's an important principle for developers because, and that's a skill that most of us we dislike it, which is to market ourselves. We know that most developers don't like it, but it's necessary, right? Because, like I said, if the developer is only doing amazing work in a private project,
Right.
okay, the developer can get a job, but it's more difficult because if no one knows what kind of amazing work this developer is doing,
Right.
then, when you're going to apply for a company or when you are in the interview, like everything gets more difficult because people have no idea on the value you are able to deliver.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's a soft skill that's very important. And, sometimes developers neglect even their LinkedIn profile or their CVs. And then I know many developers who are highly skilled, who know a lot. They're underpaid because they don't know how to market themselves. And I had this mindset as well. Like back in the days, I used to care only about technical stuff, and I was missing out all the other important soft skills. And I was like extremely underpaid. There was other developers with similar technical skills than me, and because they had some soft skills I didn't, they were earning the double, the triple, the quadruple of my salary.
Absolutely.
It is insane.
Yeah. That's,
So
yeah, I wonder if the audience, I would define a CTO as a technologist who is very good at their craft, who can speak about that technology, right? That is the difference between a CTO and a very senior, but not the most senior technologist, right? Is communication, right? That is your skill. You have to be able to speak to the business, speak to the use case, speak to the customer, speak to not just other technologists,
communication, that's so important. And I hear so much from the best developers in the world that communication is one of the most powerful skills
Yeah.
that
Especially now
we
with
usually
AI,
neglect.
human language text being the input and all that. It's even more important.
Yeah. It might be an obvious question, actually, but at the same time, hard, a little bit difficult to answer.
Okay, I like
But
those.
how would you advise developers? Because I know this is hard for developers
Yeah.
to be better at their communication skills.
Oh, I was lucky. I took Toastmasters in junior high. Toastmasters, it'll teach you to avoid doing what I just did, which is where I said, Toastmasters is a way to, it's a school you can, there's groups, you can go to your meetup, local city meetups, and you'll find groups of people who are doing Toastmasters meetings. And the whole point of it is to learn how to give a good presentation, right? And, you can see that in the way that I'm speaking to you, I've forgotten most of those lessons of good presentations, of good communication. But it was very useful for me because at least I knew what good looked like after having taken those classes. You'll learn to not have filler words like or or whatever, all the things I've just done in the last sentence. And it'll help you be more confident and to be more precise with your communication styles. So that's useful. I mean, if you can't take a class, maybe you can Google it and find out the basic lessons there and try and incorporate those into your speech. Also, keep, like you said earlier, keep empathy, have empathy, keep the position of the other person to whom you're speaking in mind. And also remember the goal is to get more customers, to make them happy, to grow the business, to make sure that people can put food on their tables and so on. The goal is not to deploy a microservices architecture using the latest and greatest standard technology, blah, blah, blah. It is not to use Java 20,000, whatever. That's not the goal. Nobody cares about this goal. It's not even to use Spring. I love Spring, but that's not the reason we're here. A corporation, a company, is a societal unit designed to facilitate the creation of value as a team. And the reason you want value is so that people will pay for that value. If you're focused on the technology, then your goals are misaligned with the organizations. And as long as you're doing that, you're not going to get that far. You want to make sure that the people at the top think you're helping steer the ship in the right direction and you're doing your best to contribute to that. So I believe truly that the best way to do that as a technologist is to use Spring because it's the fastest way to get results. But that shouldn't be your lead in. You shouldn't start the conversation with the senior leadership in terms of, well, I used the latest, greatest version of Spring, and we used what, I mean, that's not just don't do that, think about the customer first, have empathy for them, and the organization will help you that way.
Exactly. And that's something that many developers also struggle, which is to understand more about the business requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Because the business requirements are the things that you can't really learn outside of the company.
Very true.
So the only way you can learn about the business requirements is inside the company.
Right. Yeah.
And that has a lot of value because, like you said, implementing the newest Java technologies in the world with crazy AI technologies, it doesn't really matter if you're not delivering business value.
Yeah.
Because
Also, I think when you get paid, it would be very boring to live a life where you did the same thing over and over. So when you get paid to do a new job, when you sign a contract or you agree to work with somebody or whatever, there's an implicit understanding that you will do the same thing that you've done over and over, but you'll change it to reflect the reality of that group of people and the thing that they're focusing on. That implies that you will learn. It's not just output, it's also input. It's a collaborative process, isn't it? You can't, and if you go into an organization only looking to do the first half of that and not the second, then you're not going to be very successful. It has to be doing the thing in terms of what they know.
Yeah. So one other challenge that's very common among developers is how to understand the big picture of the company, right? Big picture, the business. So how do you do to learn more about the business, about the company goal? What is your strategy to learn more about those topics? Because, it takes time, right? Usually it takes time to learn about the business. And the more you learn about the business, the more valuable you become because you become more difficult to be replaceable.
Mm-hmm.
Like
You also
it's
have more
it would,
options.
you have more options.
You can contribute value in multiple places. You know who the best example of this that I know is a guy named Richard Seroder. He is the chief advocate or evangelist for Google, all of it, every part of it, right? And he and I used to work together at Pivotal. And he's amazing. He's got a great brain. His brain lets him sit down every day and just read as much as he can. So almost every day he's got his reading list that he publishes. You can go read his reading list. And it's everything. It's not just Android, it's not just Google Cloud, it's not, it's everything. The guy spends every day, he spends time every day learning about every part of the organization, every part of the world that matters to that company. And he does breadth, right? But if you do breadth every day for years and years, you will also have depth. And he also by writing it down and publishing it as a newsletter, as a reading list, he's also helping others to accumulate that breadth and the depth. Is very useful, and he talks about his reading list. I mean, just like some people consume the newspaper. I used to consume the newspaper all the time. I used to get the newspaper delivered to my home and I would read it, all of it, almost all of it. And I don't do the sports section because I don't care, but everything else, and when I first met Richard, I was like, oh, maybe I should switch. Maybe I spend half an hour to an hour doing that. I focus on my organization. And, sometimes I don't know what that means for you. Maybe that's just being involved in as many Google Chat or Slack groups as you can. Just try and keep track of the latest and greatest. Try and understand, ask questions. You don't need to know everything, but a little bit. Just try. Make sure you understand a little bit about everything that the company is doing, and then keep following it.
Yeah, because I noticed several times that the developers who got promotions more quickly weren't necessarily developers who knew more about technical subjects, but instead were the developers who knew more about the business.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Yeah, and they make the effort to learn more, they ask questions, they are interested in discussions. I think that's a great strategy. And because like only the technical knowledge won't help you much, right? It will, like, it's obviously, don't get me wrong here, technical knowledge is extremely important. We need it,
Sure.
but it's 50% of the equation.
Yes, exactly. Software is a team sport. So everything that involves, like, just because you can write technology, write code, do technology, that you still need to be a part of a team. And that communication, that interaction, that back and forth, that's the last half of it. If you can't do that, then you have failed, you know.
Exactly. And it's very important to be kind to people, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be kind, communicate with people, understand what's going on. And well, because in the end, like when we are building software, we're not just building software for nothing. Like we are solving a real world problem.
Trying to, right? We got to try.
We're trying, yeah, at least, yeah.
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 Right now,
We
I think things are getting really good for people. There's so many ways my job is to help people solve real world problems using Spring, right? Because I believe that it's a great way to solve many real world problems. And obviously, you don't need to know all of Spring to solve. What was that? Did you hear that? There's a component in my home somewhere that's on the fritz. I keep on hearing static. Anyway, I don't think there's no one single technology that I think people need to learn to be useful. But it's good to keep the breadth of what's possible. And then when at some point a use case arrives, you know what to reach for, what to learn, what to pursue.
Mhm. What are your thoughts about being a generalist versus a specialist?
We have to. You have to be a generalist. It's a good engineer is, like I said, breadth and then depth. I go deep on a topic if I need to. As a rule, I prioritize breadth. There's no such thing as, you can't specialize today, right? There's too much. And the nice thing about abstractions like Spring is that it gives you a familiar idiom, a familiar style and framework and paradigm in which to embrace new domains. So, for example, what do I mean by that? Well, if you learn Spring, if you learn the basics of Spring, it gives you a component model. It gives you ways to think about how we solve problems through dependency injection, through aspect-oriented programming, through auto configuration, etc. So you learn that's just Spring. You're learning Spring. You're not learning about a particular kind of problem. But once you've spent the little bit of time required to understand those concepts, now you can start learning about integrations with particular domains. So let's say I want to build an HTTP service. Well, you need to know what the HTTP verbs are: get, post, options, whatever. But once you've done that, now you can use Spring MVC. What if you're doing AI? You need to learn a little bit about AI. You need to learn what artificial intelligence actually means today. What is a generative chat model versus an image model? What is GP? What is the generative, the G and the GPT stand for, right? What is, all this stuff? What is RAG? What is a vector store? All that kind of stuff. Once you've done that, though, you don't have to learn all that much to get involved with Spring AI, right? The classes match the patterns, right? And it's super powerful, right? To be able to tug on these different domains and be quick and get purchase into that deep technology without having to start a whole new journey, right? Another example, security. There are people that specialize full time on security. It's hard. And if you want to do software today, you need to know security. But you're not going to learn how to write your own cryptography algorithms. You're not going to be out there keeping track of every single CVE and keeping track of all the state-of-the-art technology practices. But because we deliver abstractions, and because the people that work on these abstractions are focusing on these deep things, you can know what the general shape of that ecosystem looks like, know what the general shape of that domain looks like, and then trust that by using these open source technologies like Spring Security, you are getting the best protection and in line with the latest and greatest state of the art around security, right? So you bring in Spring Security, you need to know a little bit about security, but you don't have to be a deep, because you can build upon the code and the abstractions of people who are deep into it. You can rest easy knowing that you've got security, but you didn't have to go so far down into it. Right? To restate, to summarize, do breadth, then depth. If you have to do depth, find ways to build on work that other people who've already done that deep dive have done so that you don't have to, right? That way you can stay just above the deep dive line.
Yeah, I really like this concept of breadth and depth.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense nowadays because if you want to learn 100% of every technology, you can't. It's impossible.
Nope. It's
Back in the days,
job to learn all this stuff, and I can't.
Back in the days, it was more doable because we had only Java EE and Java. Oh, Java EE was huge, but it was still kind of doable. Like you could understand most of the features from Java EE. You could understand most of the Java features as well, the paradigms, clean code techniques. But the time nowadays is completely different. It's not that simple anymore.
Not even close. I mean, even Java EE, well, not Java, J2EE, right? Back then, like if you make a list of the things that it did for you, you had a servlet abstraction, you had JMS for a very specific set of messaging technologies, you had RPC, RPC with something called EJB, you had a directory service, JNDI, you had transaction demarcation, right? If you're doing integration with enterprise legacy middleware, transactional resources, things like that, you could do that with JCA, Java Connector Architecture. But that's it, basically. Actually, we didn't even have a persistence model until Java EE5, right? And so that's not a lot of things. It just felt like a lot of things because the code required to do it in J2EE was so much, but it's like five bullet points. Messaging is a whole discipline. It's a whole technology. So when I say JMS is just one little check mark, obviously it's a big check mark, right? It's a big box that you have to understand before you can understand JMS. But now, you're to what you were just saying, now it's so much worse, right? Now you have JMS and Apache Pulsar and Apache Kafka and RabbitMQ and whatever, right? And the list of things that Java EE can do is slightly bigger than what it could do in J2EE. There's other things you can do, but then, Spring does all of it, right? It does all these things. And so that can be very overwhelming, for people who are trying to figure out where to start, which is why, again, I would tell you to figure out what you're trying to do and then use this technology in Spring that helps you with that, as opposed to just trying to learn Spring. That won't lead, learn the basics and then figure out what you want to do. If you want to build a REST API, look at the stuff in Spring to build a REST API. If you want to build AI, look at the Spring AI project, or whatever. Don't just say, I want to learn Spring. It's too big. Too many cool things you can do.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a very good point, to know what problem you want to solve,
Mhm.
and then apply the technology from Spring and then learn this technology. In your opinion, what technologies should Java developers learn nowadays?
Ooh,
Because
well,
there's so much nowadays, and Java ecosystem is insane, it's huge. I get this question from many mentees of mine. They don't know where to start. They don't know what to study. It's so
yeah.
difficult to focus on the right technology. And I want to know your opinion, your thoughts on that, so that, my
Oh,
mentees know more clear where to start and what to study.
well, obviously, I'm going to give you a list, and you and I are recording this in the middle of March of 2025. This list will change next year or 10 years from now. So if you're watching this video, feel free to challenge some of these assertions, because they might change based on the era in which you watch this. But obviously, I think good fundamentals in Java are critical. I think learning Java is very good. It's one of the best bets that you can make today, because it is still the only successful general purpose platform, right? There's no doubt that if you want to build a modern SPA, a single page app, you're probably going to use JavaScript. Okay, so that's fine, right? If you want to train and build your own models, you're probably going to use Python, right? If you want to build everything else, you're probably going to use Java. It's the only thing that can do everything else, right? And I mean, .NET has some of that, but not nearly as much. I mean, obviously, just because of the nature of the community, it's very closed and so on. It's not closed source, thankfully. It's gotten much better in that regard, but it'll pale, even, especially compared to Java, just because Java's older, right? We've got more years. Even if .NET was just as big as Java, Java's still older, so there's more history of people building stuff. So there's that. Java is a very good language to learn, and the JDK itself it'll take you to places, places that weren't available to us when we first started using Java, 20, 30 years. It's 30 years is old, 30 years old this year. So Java 30 years ago, if you had said to me in 1999, hey, when you get really into this Java stuff, or 1998 when I started, if you get into this Java stuff, really get into it and just keep using it, then you can do AI, and you'll be able to build mobile apps, and you'll also be able to do native operating system specific CLIs, and you can also do, every microservice for distributed systems. None of that would make any sense to me, because in 1998, we used Java for applets, right? There's no database. Well, JDBC was just coming out, right? There's no way to build server-side applications. It was a client-side technology. That's just as weird as somebody saying to you in 2009 that, hey, one day you'll use JavaScript on the server side. It's a client-side technology. Why would I use that on the server side? It made no sense, Then Node came out, and now you can kind of use that on the server side. Today, the things you can do with a JVM or with GraalVM and your JDK are basically endless, And a case in point, a good example of that, I have this thought exercise that I do. I think about it all the time. Like back in 2000 and whatever, 10 or whatever it was, the engineers from Google were sitting in a room discussing this new Kubernetes thing, right? And well, I'm sure they didn't call it that. The new thing that they're going to build, and they decided, okay, well, we have to build this thing, and what are we going to use to build it? They have this new language called Go. There's Java, which has been around for a long time, and maybe there's other languages. Which ones would do a good job here? And I think about that a lot. Why did they choose Go over Java at the time? Well, Go has statically linked, self-contained native binaries. Java does not at the time. It does now. GraalVM, native images. Go has easy foreign function interop, meaning they had an easy way in your code to describe and then link to and then look up and use native symbols in the operating system. Java did not have that. You could write more C++ code using JNI, but that was not fun or efficient or flexible or fast. It was painful, you know. Now we have Project Panama, which shipped about a year ago. Go has Go routines, lightweight green or green threads or fibers. Now we have virtual threads. So now Java is not just a better, faster Java that we knew about in 1998, but it's also a better, faster Go, right? It can do things that we would not have even thought it was appropriate for 15 years ago, you know? I think you could build Kubernetes today. It would, you know, I'm not saying we should. They've already built Kubernetes. No need to, you know, reinvent the wheel. But my point is in theory, you could now. It's an amazing time. So in terms of what technologies you should learn today, keep that in mind. The list will change. You know, what didn't make sense then makes sense now. So things I think are very important. Obviously, learn the foundations of your JDK, learn about virtual threads, learn about GraalVM native images, learn about Project Laden, all these optimizations that take your code and make them more robust. Learn about containers. Obviously, you're going to need that whether you're using Kubernetes or, you know, one of the like Google Cloud Run or Cloud Foundry or whatever. Containers are super useful there. Learn about, you know, you're going to need HTTP. Doesn't matter what you're doing. HTTP is part of it. So learn, if you're using Spring, learn the Spring MVC stack, you know, to build that. Learn about observability because you can't improve what you cannot measure. And so we have the actuator module in Spring Boot that's been there from day one. It's the most robust, expansive set of observability integrations out there. And then learn about messaging because obviously a lot of systems today use asynchronous event-driven sort of architectures. Super useful. It's the, you know, it can mix and match with HTTP or it can be a complement to it. And then learn about your particular focus, right? At this point, it's very much choose your own adventure, right? How do you want to talk to a database? What kind of database? Do you want to talk to a database at all? Great. I would probably learn SQL. I think Spring Data JDBC is a really nice technology for people. I think you should all learn SQL. Everybody should learn SQL, right? Postgres. I'm a big fan of Postgres. It's not the only database out there. There are many others that do really good things. Like I love Neo4j. I love Redis. I mean, there's always Elasticsearch. I mean, these are the best in the industry at what they do, MongoDB, you know, these kinds of things. But if you only have enough time to learn one database and you can only put in, you want to get like useful, but not an expert in one thing, I would learn a SQL database. And today it makes no sense to learn anything besides Postgres because everything is based on Postgres. You can get Postgres that scales like Cassandra with a Yugabyte. You can get Postgres that scales like a Spanner with CockroachDB, right? You can do amazing things with Postgres compliant syntax, right? And Postgres itself can also do vector stores and functions and stored procedures and views. And it's, you know, it's got all the features as well as all the scale. So it's a very good single database. If you only had time to learn one, you don't, you have time to learn more and you should, but if you have to start with Postgres, it'll get you the most openings. And then from there, yeah, like, are you going to do AI? Learn Spring AI. If you're going to do integration and messaging, use Spring integration. If you're going to do security, learn Spring security, you know, but you need to focus on those fundamental things that apply to all applications like HTTP, you know, virtual threads, like whatever. Yeah.
And what would you say about algorithms and system design? Because from what I've seen in the market nowadays, the interviews are not based on the technologies you know anymore. They don't care. I see a standard in the market where most companies, they always do the same. They'll give you a code challenge. They'll ask you about an algorithm principle. And, you know, there is always a standard because while you are coding your algorithm, you have to explain your thought process. And it has to be a specific way. You have to explain the concepts in a specific way. And then you're going to have the system design interview where you have to design Instagram in 45 minutes. So what are your thoughts regarding that? Do you agree with that? Do you think we should really invest a lot of our time studying those code challenges and system design problems? Because, you know, I don't want to make your answer biased, but
Yeah.
you don't use those things directly in your day-to-day job. So I'd like to know what is your opinion regarding that.
Yeah, this is like the lead code and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as we discussed earlier, I haven't looked for a job in 15 years, right? So I'm out of touch with that market. But broadly and conceptually, I understand why businesses want some consistent measure of a potential employee's worth. And I've seen a sort of backlash against these boot camps, right? These boot camps promise that you can get a job as a software engineer in just, whatever, a month or something like that, which is not realistic, And so now companies are trying to make sure they're trying to weed out the people that actually have the skills versus the people that have 2 weeks of exposure, and or whatever. I don't know how much time these workshops have. Very unrealistic, very short timelines, a lot of them, not all of them. Surely some of them are good. So I can understand why companies are being more cautious. They don't want to have a long discussion with somebody that just picked up a computer and learned how to program in the last month, On the other hand, I don't really think that finding the senior most people is, you're not going to find those people by getting them to do a linked list or something, particularly in the era of AI. Now, I think understanding why you want a linked list or why you want a map or why you want a set and what their differences are, or why you would want to sort something in a particular way, being able to verbalize why you might apply these things in your code, I think is valuable. But like you said, you're not going to ever write one of these. And if you do need to write one of these, you'll probably just talk to the AI. The model will do it for you today. That's one of my favorite use cases of models, is to get it to write the boring code that I could do, but I just don't want to waste the 10 characters. Write Fibonacci or whatever, it's just not interesting. It's not interesting code. It's what we call undifferentiated heavy lifting. It's work that you have to do that does nothing for the organization. So prioritizing that, if you're really looking for good people, that's not the way to go. But if you're trying to make sure that you don't have bad people, maybe that's what you have to do, right? And there's two sides to it. So I don't know. I don't know if I would, appreciate having to go through that interview process. I don't think I would bother with it for me as a person with 25 years of experience. But maybe if you don't know me, maybe you think I've only got 2 weeks of experience, and maybe you want to have a very basic test. I don't know. It's very hard to say. I can understand both sides.
Yeah,
the system design is more interesting to me. That one, at least then people can understand that I understand how these things are put together and roughly how they sort of work,
Yeah, system design is more interesting, definitely, because you have to think as a software engineer.
Yeah. And, well, as an architect even, you have to have a picture of the layout of the system,
Exactly.
And then for me, I would like to see if I could actually build a working Instagram in 45 minutes. With Spring, maybe I could. Not like as good as Instagram, but close enough,
Yeah. So yeah, basically the idea of this interview is that you build Instagram with the main features, with the most basic features. So you just, put your design there, the components, and that's it, basically. So yeah, definitely you would be able to create Instagram with Spring.
My only limitation, I have this much skill with HTML and client-side applications. I would ask the model to generate a Vue or a HTMX or something app for me.
AI to the rescue.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that should be a real part of it. I think that's another thing is, don't sleep on AI. It's not the hype. People are saying it's gonna take all of our jobs, and I don't know if that's true right now. It doesn't feel like it's true today, right? Maybe 10 years, maybe 5 years, maybe next year. I don't know. But today, no, and in the meantime, it's a tool. It's a very useful tool, just to get rid of a lot of the boring stuff. One of the things that I love to do, and I'm sure you have the same thing, Raphael, is you'll have a problem. Well, maybe you don't have this because you never have bugs in your code. But when I have a bug in my code,
I do have bugs in my code.
no,
Yes.
no. But when I have a bug in my code, I like to talk, rubber ducking, right? You take a rubber duck, and you talk to it. Have you heard of
Yeah.
this practice? Yeah. People
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
this.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. You just talk to the duck, and you explain the bug that you're having, and you work it out verbally, you know, and that process of actually vocalizing the problem you're facing sometimes help you to see or to have insight about how to fix that problem. There's a great talk by Neil Ford, um, 20 years ago, something like that, long time ago. Well, no, 2010, 15 years ago. So 2008 or 9, so 16, 17, long time ago. Great talk by a guy named Neil Ford, who is another perfect presenter. He's one of those absolute all-time go-to presenters out there. And he did he did a keynote for the server-side Java Symposium many decades ago, and this was On the Lam from the Furniture Police. What a great title. On the Lam from the Furniture Police, which means he's on the run to hide from the furniture police. And the whole point of this talk was that software engineers are very expensive to keep employed, to keep them. And it's very painful, it's very expensive cognitively for software engineers to do what they do. It takes a lot out of them because they have to think about a very complex domain and a complex problem set, and they have to apply intelligence to it. And if you distract them, if you interrupt them all the time, you're destroying that focus. It's hard for them to maintain the problem space in their head if you constantly interrupt them and make them come to meetings and make them come to, another meeting that's a repeat of the existing one. It's a nightmare. It's a waste of the investment that you made by employing this person in the first place. And so he talks about how at the time, maybe this has changed since, but at the time, the understanding was that the two lobes, the two sides of the brain communicate with each other, and each side is, my understanding is that today both sides can do a little bit of everything, but they certain things focus on one side or the other. So creativity is on one side and logical rational processing on the other, and so on. And so in order to get a good solution, you need to have both sides be quiet so that you can think. You've heard the story about Archimedes, the Eureka moment. Apparently Archimedes was trying to figure out something, and he was trying to figure out how to figure out the volume of water displaced by something, and he was sat in a bathtub, and the bathtub water overflowed, right? And he wasn't really thinking about the problem, but then the bathtub water overflowed, and he's, oh, this is how I solved the problem. He jumped out of the tub and said, Eureka, right? And that was how he figured out the problem. And I think about this a lot, not because my bathtub water overflows, but because a lot of engineers, we think about problems in the shower, or when we're taking a walk, or when we're not focused on the problem, the answer comes. And this is because we let the brain be quiet. We just stop the problem and we stop thinking about it, let this side shut up so that this one can participate, or vice versa. And then suddenly the answer comes. And if you understand that this happens, then you can actually you can force it to happen. And one of the ways you can force it is to give your other senses, which they input to different sides of the brain. If you give all your senses a chance to participate, they will help. They will light up the parts of your brain that might have different insight. For example, some people read a page of text and they get stuck on a line, and they read the rest of the text and they don't know what they read. Their brain is still stuck on that first line that they had an issue with, and they didn't go back and fix it before they moved on. Well, if you want to make sure you catch the error, read the text out loud. You read the text out loud, it goes out of your mouth, goes back into your ears, and that's a different processing than just reading it quietly visually. It's very interesting. And then, so the same thing with rubber ducking. If you talk to a duck, even a toy duck, and you talk to it and explain the problem, the act of speaking, the act of hearing the words and having them go back into your brain through your ears, it can open up insight, right? This is why mind maps work. Mind maps are you take a picture, you draw a picture of the relationships of different entities in the organization of this domain that you're trying to address. Drawing the picture itself forces you to realize that there are connections between these different things that you didn't realize before. You can see the relationships that you didn't realize were there before. And it's all knowledge that was in your brain. You just put it in a different shape, and now you saw something you didn't see. You understood hierarchy and connections. and it's all about visually processing it, right? So doing this is super valuable as an engineer. You need to learn to find different ways to articulate the problem. AI is amazing for this. AI makes you talk about the problem, and you can have it rubber duck for you. You can have it talk back and say, hey, you said you're having this problem. Maybe you should try that and this. It's amazing. It's like pair programming. That's one of my favorite ways to use it. It's to rubber duck. I tell it my problem. I don't even want it necessarily to solve it to me. I just want it to help me like think through the process. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes it can't help me solve it. It's never seen that problem. But that back and forth, that pair programming is so good.
That's amazing. Actually, an app that I don't think it would be very difficult to develop, but I think it would be highly successful. Like if we could build a rubber duck that can understand our voice,
Yes.
and it can answer to us, like the rubber duck can really talk to us using AI. That would be amazing. That's totally possible because computers can understand our voices, and they can also send back the answer. So
Can you
yeah,
imagine?
that would be amazing.
We could have a home appliance called Hey Ducky, instead of Hey Siri, instead of that, you'd say Hey Ducky, and then it turns from regular yellow to bright yellow, and then it starts talking to you. Oh, that'd be so good. My dog has little rubber yellow ducks that are on the floor here. I'm wondering where they are.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, but yeah, it's a very powerful idea, like to talk to rubber ducks and to discuss ideas with AI, because AI nowadays is so powerful, right?
Yeah.
You can have such a high level discussion with AI, and a problem that you might be stuck when you are only in your mind.
Yeah.
And you don't get out of your mind, it's very difficult to solve a problem. But when you write down the problem, or when you talk to a rubber duck, or when you write down your problem to AI, then it's different. Then you have new insights.
Right. It's amazing. It's amazing what your brain can do. The brain is really amazing.
Yeah. And the other thing that happens a lot with us developers is that, for example, like when we are facing a very difficult code problem, like when we sleep in the following day,
yes,
we usually have the answer.
It percolates because you quieted the brain. You let it process.
Yeah, it's because also our subconscious mind is 80% more powerful than our conscious mind.
Yeah.
So our subconscious mind is a tank, right? It's so powerful.
Yeah. And if you give it a chance to participate, it will help. Yeah, totally. And I'm sure any senior engineer or senior technology person or senior engineering person has had, or senior scientist, anybody who's done this for more than a few months will have had this experience of being stuck and then walking away from it, and oh, I get it, eureka,
Eureka moment.
Yeah, totally.
So you mentioned about AI, and I see in every conference, I see the titles and abstracts. It's always about AI, but there is a lot going on, right? So
yes and no.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Okay. Can you tell me what technologies should Java developers focus on? Do you think it's useful for Java developers to learn AI concepts and fundamentals, or it's more useful to learn how to use those tools? What is your opinion regarding that?
Both. First of all, if you're a Java developer, a JVM developer, when I say Java developer, for this whole interview, I hope people remember, I'm also talking about Kotlin and Groovy and Scala, and the JVM is a wonderful, rich ecosystem. When I say Java, I mean all the languages. Anyway, AI today is an integration game. Most people, 99% of the people out there, are not going to build their own models, right? They're not going to they're not going to build their own engine. They're going to talk to something that's already been built. It might be on premise, it might be in the cloud, it might be paid, it might be free, it might be open, but you're going to consume it by talking to it. You're not going to build it, right? So you can use Olama. Well, Olama, let the people working on Olama build that for you, Meta and so on, or using OpenAI or Amazon Bedrock or Google Gemini or Azure OpenAI or whatever, right? 99% of the valid use cases for AI today are just talking to an existing AI model. These AI models are just REST APIs. There's nothing scary about them. You send a query, you get a response back. It's actually a very easy API. The Amazon S3 API is more difficult than most of these AI endpoint models. Well, Java is really good at integration. It's amazing at this kind of stuff. And it takes less code to do it thanks to virtual threads in a scalable way. So we are uniquely well positioned here. And when you look at all of AI engineering, most people, since they're not building their models, they're just consuming it and integrating it into their business apps. The question then is, there's two questions. One is, how do I give it access to my data? And how do I give it access to my business logic? Because the real power comes from taking AI models like a chat model or an image model or a transcription model and integrating it with my unique domain, my unique business logic, my business functionality. So that's, I mean, this is integration. It's glue code. This is where Java is the best in the industry. This is why it's so popular. We are the absolute best position to do this. And so we should take advantage of this opportunity. Most of the business logic in your organization is probably already Java. So that's where you want to start writing these integrations with AI, is in that business logic in your organization that controls the business itself, right? You want to put that AI near the heart of that stuff, right? Well, that doesn't mean writing more Python code. That means integrating into the Java program you've already got, into the service. Same thing for business functionality. Your data and your services and your functionality are all in the same code base. Your data is guarded by these Java Spring services. So we have a unique and wonderful opportunity here. Now, what does it mean to talk to an AI model? Well, like I said, at the fundamental level, it's just a REST call. That's it, a token and a REST call. It's the easiest thing in the world. But how do you do all the amazing things that people are doing these days? Well, there are patterns. One thing that's interesting to remember is that when you use AI, it has no memory. So when you use an AI model, if you talk to ChatGPT and you say, "Hi, my name is Josh," hit enter, and then a second later you say, "What's my name?" It'll say, "Oh, your name is Josh," because I just said it. But when you use these AI models as an API, there is no memory. So you have to give it memory. You have to keep track of the memory when you send the request. You have to keep it locally and then send every message that's been sent so far each time you send the message, so that the AI model can look at the past messages and keep up with the conversation, right? Otherwise, it doesn't have a session concept like in HTTP. Okay, fine. That's a thing you can do. And it's like Spring AI provides an easy way to keep track of memory, chat memory. Okay, fine. Another thing that people really want to do is, and by the way, when I say keep track of memory, I mean, it can be as simple as just using the almighty, very powerful string concatenation operator, right? This is what we're talking about here. It's just strings being sent to the model and then strings being sent back most of the time. Okay, well, what if I want the model to access, I want it to analyze and work with my data? I've got data sitting in a SQL database or a Neo4j or whatever. That's called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. The pattern is very simple. You take data, you put it in the string in a way that makes sense, and you send it to the model for analysis, and it gives you a response. But what if you have too much data? You don't want to do select all. You want to find only the data that makes sense for the request and then send that minimal set of data to the model. Well, you can put it in a vector store, and the vector store can do similarity search. So then you take the results of that and you put that in the string and send it to the model. So again, this is not very hard. I write data to a vector store it's like putting it in Neo4j or Elasticsearch or whatever. It's a specific kind of data store, but there's 20 of them, so you can pick whatever one you want. Postgres has one, right? You put it in the vector store, get the subset of data you want, and then send it off to the model. Fine. So now I've done RAG, and now my model has access to my data, and I'm not wasting bandwidth and token count, AI model token count, sending unnecessary data. Great. Well, what about my business logic? Well, all these models, most of them, support what's called they support tool callbacks or function callbacks. Basically, you can say, "Hey, model, I'm going to ask you to analyze my situation, but you're going to need some information. You're going to need to know what the weather is right now. You're going to need to know what the stock price is right now. You're going to need to know what the order number for this order from this user is. And since the model doesn't know this stuff directly, it has to have a way to ask. So there is a convention where you can tell the model, I have a function called get weather. I have a function called get order number. I have a function called, get stock price, whatever. And you give it the name of the function in strings. And it'll come back to you and say, okay, in order for me to proceed, I need to call get weather with these parameters. It'll then ask you to call that function locally. And you give it the response from that function, and it'll incorporate it back into the AI, and then it'll use that for further analysis. That's now your AI can invoke your business logic and talk to your data and get your current up-to-date data as quick as it wants. That's it. You're done. You're an AI engineer. If you understand those patterns, RAG, memory, tool, a function calling, etc. And then there's the string that you send to the model. That's called a prompt. There's two types of prompts: system prompts and user prompts. Right? System prompts they govern the overall tone and tenor of their requests and responses, and then the user prompt is what the user might send as their request or the specific question for this request. That's 80 or 90% of all interactions with models these days, is that basic loop. And Spring AI makes most of that auto-configured. You just inject the chat client and start sending strings away after you specified your token in the properties, right? So don't let people scare you. There's a lot of stuff happening in the space where you're developing models, but that's not what most of us need to be concerned with. In the same way that most of us don't need to create our own SQL database, right? I'm not going to write my own SQL database. I've already got Postgres. Just use that, There's no reason for me to start learning C and building a SQL database, So I think we're in a really good place, and I don't want people to be scared by these models. It's a really interesting space, and you can use it right now to deliver value. And it's getting cheaper. You heard about that DeepSeek model? That's 20, 30 times, something like that, more cost effective than these other models.
Wow.
So it's cheap now, but it's only going to get cheaper, right? To use these models and do amazing things. There's a new trend right now, which is, hey, all that stuff I just told you about is basic uses of AI, right? You send a request, you get a response, and you have memory and all that stuff. The next frontier, the thing that people are focusing on for the last half year or year, is what if we let, and I already told you about how you can have the AI call back into your functions. What if we use the AI iteratively, right? What if you use the AI model to answer its own questions? You have one model ask a question and the other one answers it. Or you have one model ask a question and the other one validates that's a good answer, like a test, like an evaluator. Or even more complex, what if you have several different iterations at calculating some piece of code, right? You can have one thing say, here's your implementation of Fibonacci, and the other one says, that's good, but you could get rid of this. And then the other one says, okay, I'll fix it. Here's a better version. And the other one says, that's better, but what about this? And you keep, and it's just a while not true loop, right? You just do a while loop and you can ask one model to evaluate the other one and you iterate and you get a much better result that way. That idea of using control flow structures like for loops and while loops and whatever to have models orchestrate and do interesting things, that's called agentic. So you hear about people talking about agentic patterns, right? I live in San Francisco, all over the city. You see agentic this, agentic that, agent, Salesforce has agent force. It's borderline silly. What they're talking about is just letting AI control its own flow by having iteration, by having control flow, while loops, if then, that kind of stuff. This is not hard, You can do this today. Anybody can do it today, right? And obviously Spring is a really great way to do it. I think it's the best way, but there are others as well. And they all make this much more approachable than maybe it sounds if you just listen to all the hype. Ignore the hype, just focus on very simple concepts.
Yeah, this is very interesting to hear because, sometimes we see the hype and we think that there is like an avalanche of things to learn, but sometimes it's not that much. So you mentioned that we as Java developers, we should learn about RAG, memory, system prompts, user prompts, like those agentic, which is basically controlling the flow with AI and, integrating apps. And Java is extremely powerful for that. Spring has all the tools we need. And Yeah, super
Yeah.
cool. Like it's sometimes we think it's a monster, but it's actually not that much.
Yeah, I agree. This is like the old, WS, SOA back in 20 years ago. We had, it's a very simple concept. Do not repeat yourself. Build a network service, share it with the world in open standards. But then it just ballooned into this huge thing, and I'm very scared that people are going to write off AI. They're going to dismiss AI because they don't understand it, because it's become this incredibly huge thing that is unmanageably large and complex. And the fundamentals are the same. We're learning. We have some new things that we learn every now and then. I'm not saying it's not changing a little bit, but it's not nearly as bad as some of the hype might suggest.
Do you think the companies are applying the concepts of AI in their
Oh yeah.
businesses? Like most companies are doing that, or do you think more like the companies are kind of ignoring for now?
Yeah, I don't know that most businesses are, but I don't think any organization out there at the CIO or the CTO level isn't already asking themselves where AI could fit, and especially now that the cost economic model is, the asymptote is just down, right? It's always going down. It's cheaper and cheaper. And the power, the response, the capabilities is better and better. One of the examples is in the very beginning, like in 2022, or was it 23? When did OpenAI come out? I think it was 2022 in November. When it first came out, it had a few thousand. You could only send a few. They have this thing called a token count in these models. The token count, it's not exactly, but for now, let's just say it's a word. Okay. It's not exactly, but it's a representative, it's a measure of the complexity. And the complexity in turn often translates into dollars and cents cost. Okay. So it's very good to keep a handle on the token count, because that has a implication for the cost usually. But that, you can only send and receive a few thousand tokens. Well, I think I saw Gemini now has 1 million or something like that. I mean, we're some of the patterns that we had a few years ago to reduce the body of text that we sent because we could only fit it in a few thousand tokens. Well, they don't make any sense anymore. You can send a whole book now, like you shouldn't, probably, right? You probably don't need to do that. But I mean, it's getting easier and easier all the time, is what I'm trying to say.
So powerful. You can get the whole summary of a whole book in seconds.
Yeah, it's amazing. Even really big books too. So anyway, you're asking if all companies are doing it. I think everybody's thinking about it. I certainly, they would be foolish to not wonder about it. You've probably, I mean, everybody watching this has probably used a chat bot somewhere, and some of them are really terrible, right? Obviously, but imagine if that got better and smoother, right? And if it got really more capable, and I think we're going to get there. We're going to get to the point where you could probably talk to a computer for minutes, tens of minutes, maybe at some point in the not too distant future, and never know that you're not talking to a person, right? It's conceptually, there's no reason why that couldn't be true. Yeah, I think it's a very useful thing. And obviously, there's so much more that you can do besides just chatbots. Like I think about, okay, I don't even know. Okay, you can use AI to make decisions about how to route a message. Well, now imagine
That's nice.
you're now in Spring integration. You're doing enterprise integration patterns, right? Messaging, integrating one messaging system to another or something. But now you stick AI in there and have it decide where to route the message. Is this spam? Is this customer service? Is this technical support? Whatever. Okay, simple. Messaging plus AI. What about security? Is this actually can I use Spring Security and create some sort of router or some rules that have to pass through AI? Like everything goes through here, but for some very suspicious things that we determined by using this AI, maybe send it over there. Maybe. Or what about Spring Cloud Gateway, which is a proxy, right? Again, that routing logic goes in there. You can use AI for that. What about testing? You can do fuzz testing automatically. You can have AI write the test for you, dynamically on each run based on the outputs of the previous test or something like that. I mean, just incredible opportunities. Your day-to-day interactions can now become, I think, more interesting,
It's so
What about
much
batch
power.
processing? Batch processing, you do
Batch
like
process.
batch processing, you're reading in large amounts of sequential data. Imagine like a CSV file. I don't know how many people are using CSV, but imagine you've got some sort of system with CSV data. You want to read in 100,000 rows of CSV data, but on row 75,555, there's some improper formatted data. Do I fail the whole thing? Is the whole batch job broken now? Or what if I just send that one broken row to the AI and have it fix it for me? And now the batch job can continue without having to get human intervention. And just all these little things, the small things, that just make it just seem very interesting to me,
Yeah, that's amazing. Like it's insane the amount of power we have with AI.
Oh yeah,
Like
and also rubber
it's
ducks, even if you want to write the
rubber
code
ducks.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, rubber ducks. Two very powerful tools, definitely for software developers. Josh, in your
Yes, sir.
opinion, what books or courses do you recommend for Java
Oh,
developers?
this is a tough one. Uh, for Java, if you don't know anything about Java and you're patient, my favorite book is Bruce Eccles' Thinking in Java. That book is from the 90s. So it is, and he's updated it. Maybe he's got other books. Bruce Eccles has written another book on Java 8, I think. Maybe that's the one you should read. But Bruce Eccles, he wrote that first book in the 90s, Thinking in Java, after he wrote Thinking in C++. He was a member of the C++ standards body, right? And so he came into Java excited to try it out and to use it and to take his knowledge from C++ and apply it in Java. And one of the things that is really amazing about that, remember we talked about empathy for the beginner? Well, he was
Yep.
writing this book as a beginner, but he was also a senior person in C++. He understood a lot about how to do it one way, but very little about how to do it this new way. So you could see his amazing brain working through this new language back in the 90s. And he was able to contextualize and say, look, I can see that this feature was designed and the ambition was for this, but it's clearly fell short here and here. It's not as good as it could have been. Or actually, this is a really nice feature that I'm really glad that we have because we did not have this in C++. So it's an introductory book, but it's not a cheerleader, It's a book that helps you understand, hey, Java's got this amazing potential, but it's not all yet been delivered or realized, right? There's more to it that still has to come. Now, in the last 25 plus years, obviously, a lot of that has come and it's been delivered. But reading that book was very useful for me because it wasn't just this propaganda, it was this very good, grounded, deep dive into the features. And he's very good at looking at all the details. I've had him on my podcast, Bruce Eccles. The way his brain works, he needs to know everything before he can write about it. Everything about a topic. And so when you read these chapters, they're just such a very good, they start from zero, but by the time you're done, you understand everything you could ever understand about that topic in Java, So if it's just a ground truth intro to Java, I would definitely read Thinking in Java or his whatever the other Java 8 book was, right? In fact, if you find the second edition or later of Thinking in Java, I sent him a letter a few years later, and he printed it in the book. So you can find a comment from me from like 2002.
Oh, it's amazing.
I'm a big fan of that book. It helped me a lot. Because again, I knew Java from the 90s, but I didn't really understand object-oriented programming. I didn't understand these concepts. So by the time 2000 rolled around, I was starting to get a hang of it and starting to feel like I knew what it meant to be a Java programmer as opposed to a C programmer. It was just so good to read his text and have him validate that and go, yeah, this is what you're meant to do, right? You solve solutions in this style. This is, and then he taught me about things I didn't know I needed to know. So that's a great book also to learn the breadth and then also the depth. You can read all the chapters, read the first half of each chapter, and you'll understand breadth. Read the last half of each chapter, you'll also understand depth. He's just an amazing book. So then, once you've understood Java, obviously there's a lot that's come since those books have come out, but you can spend a few weekends learning about lambdas and virtual threads and var and all this other good stuff, right? But after that, then it's a question of what are you trying to do? What's your use case? Oh, by the way, I think didn't Bruce Eccles do a Kotlin book?
Oh,
I think he did. He did a Scala book, that's for sure. Yeah, he did. It's called Atomic Kotlin. And that's also, if he wrote it, it's going to be good. Actually, It's two very smart people, Bruce Eckel and Svetlana Isakova. So both of them, I have a lot of respect for, and yeah, their book is worth a read too. So there's that. And then like I said earlier, it's about what are you trying to do? You can't just learn, don't just say I'm going to learn Java. That doesn't make any sense after a point, You have to say I want to build something with AI. Okay, great. Go learn about Spring AI. And so we have on the Spring homepage, spring.io/guides. These guides are 10 to 15-minute long introductions to different things, just so you can get something working, right? Make it wiggle. Do you want to, as long as that Kill Bill movie, and
Yeah.
the protagonist is in the truck and she's trying to get her toe to wiggle. Once you've gotten it to wiggle, everything else will come back to life. You'll make everything can proceed from there, but you've got to get that toe to wiggle first, right? And make it wiggle, make your code wiggle first. Then you can do the rest. And so these guides are all about how to get something wiggling, get something that you can prove it works. Like I made a simple hello call to an AI model and I got a response. I used JPA to write something to a persistence database, or I sent a message via RabbitMQ or Kafka, whatever, just back and forth, From there, it's very easy to go, okay, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? But, very important.
Awesome. Any other book?
In terms of books, anything from Bruce Eckel, anything from Dr. Subramaniam, obviously, huge fan.
Your books. Your books also. I have to talk
Oh.
about your books.
Oh, books. Well, if you're learning, look, if you want to learn Spring Boot, I did a book called Cloud Native Java that is from 2017, and that's all about Spring Boot 2, and most of that is the same today, right? It'll work. It's about building microservices and systems, but it's not. It assumes that you already understand Java there, and yeah, you can start with that. It's actually okay. There's a whole section in there that's an intro to Spring Boot that I think is quite good as well, and yeah, that's a good book, but it's old. First of all, it's 2017, and some of the concepts are different today. And yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
I did a book on reactive programming, but that's from 2021, 2020, something like that. It's good too, but it's, again, if you're doing reactive programming. If you're not, then maybe that's not the book for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You also have the Spring 6 recipes.
Okay. I wrote that book. I wrote the second edition of that. I was one of the main authors on the second edition of that. And that was back in 2010, right? Long time ago. And many great people have updated it. And so my name is still on the list. Spring 6 recipes, but I think is it Andrew Lombardi, right? Like Andrew Lombardi and I'm looking for am I thinking the right book? Martin M. Danum, Daniel Rubio, and me. That's the 5th edition. What about the 6th edition?
The same. Daniel Rubio, Josh Long, and Martin Jr.
Oh, then I'm thinking of somebody else. So what did Andrew Lombardi work on? He did a great book too. Martin Danum is great. And Daniel Rubio, but Martin you probably know more because he's in the Spring community. I do this blog called This Week in Spring every Tuesday on spring.io for 15 years, and I've never missed one every Tuesday. And Martin, I've seen he writes blogs, he writes interesting stuff all the time. What did Andrew Lombardi and Joseph Ottinger do? They did a good book as well. Beginning Spring 6, From Beginner to Pro. It's also pretty good as well. Obviously, the best book, in terms of Spring, the best book is Craig Wall's. He wrote Spring in Action. That's like the Bible, right? Like it's, we've all read that book. That's a great book.
Yeah, that's definitely an amazing book.
Yeah.
Do you have course to recommend or only books?
Oh, it's a coincidence, or is it a coincidence that yesterday I did a video?
Nice.
Here, I'll share this if you don't mind sharing this
Sure.
with you.
Yeah, I will share in the description of
Yep.
this video or podcast. You can watch Josh Long's video. Tell us what is the video about.
Well, you go to .com/@coffee-software, and you'll find a video called the Spring Boot End-to-End Tutorial, (new for 2025). It's 2 hours, And I recorded it over the weekend because people keep on asking me for this. And I just posted it last night after a little bit of editing, I got rid of a lot of the ums and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Very good. Nobody wants to sit there and listen to that. I look at, well, I even mentioned, I look at dependency injection, auto configuration, Spring Framework, Spring Data JDBC, Spring MVC, Spring Batch, Spring Integration, Spring for RabbitMQ, Spring Modulet, testing, virtual threads, GraalVM, Docker Compose, observability, Spring AI, Spring GraphQL, Spring gRPC, Spring Security, Spring Cloud Config Server, OAuth Resource Servers, Spring Authorization Server, OAuth Clients, Spring Cloud Config Client, Spring Cloud Gateway, and Spring Boot in those 2 hours. And that's almost every project on Spring.io/projects, except for, like I said, this is the problem with Spring, is you can do anything and it doesn't take a lot of time. I looked at all those. I did something with all of those in 2 hours, right? Live, start to finish, no breaks, no water, no nothing, just 2 hours. So you can do anything with Spring. It's very powerful. And so I show you how to pull these things together. And it's very productive. It's the most productive technology out there. It's way more, like you can't get that much done with that little bit of code in any other language or technology or platform. Not Python, not PHP, nothing in Java, not Ruby, nothing, right? It's not Node.js. Spring is an amazing thing. It's because it's optimized for productivity and production. So if you know Java and you want to get into Spring Boot, watch this video. It came out March 9th of 2025.
Wow, that's fantastic. There's so many features, so many things you teach in this video.
Yeah, make
Wow,
everything
2
wiggle.
hours, make everything wiggle.
That's
That's
the
amazing. I really like that.
Thank you,
My
man.
old style of learning back in the days was to go really deep into one thing.
Right. Very good idea. At least once you've understood the breadth, go depth. Absolutely.
Yeah, but nowadays it doesn't work anymore.
Too much.
It's too much. So I really like your approach of, showing all of those features, making it work, and
And
showing
integrate.
something from something usable, something that you can create your own app, right?
Right.
You can create something useful. And that's the way we have to think nowadays as software engineers, making things work.
Yeah. Yeah. And integrate. I start from zero and I layer these things in. Start from apps. I introduce the basics of like object-oriented programming, and then I introduced Spring Boot, and I introduced Spring Framework and configuration, and then Spring Boot and auto config, and then we start doing all these things. But I start from zero. We have nothing on my local machine except for a folder full of some property files, and I introduce those property files.
That's excellent. I really like that. And I'll share the video here in the description so you can also watch it. And I highly recommend you to watch it because there's a lot of value there.
Cheers. Thanks, buddy.
Awesome. Well, nowadays it's difficult to manage our time, right? To study new things, to get up to date. How do you manage your time to be always up to date as a software developer?
I do what I've talked to you about. We do two things, right? I do, like I said, Richard Schroeder does. I spend every day, maybe an hour, I spend half an hour reading the news on technology, on Spring, on Java, on the ecosystem. It used to be so much easier. We used to have the server side. We could go to serverside.com and you'd learn about the latest and greatest in the Java world. Now it's sort of, and they got, RSS, sadly, isn't, it's not as useful as it used to be. It used to be I had a Google Reader and I could go there and read 1,000 different interesting things every day. There's something about from all these different websites, but now I have to go to different websites and look at their ads and all that stuff. But I keep a list of things that I want to go see. I want to check up on every day. There's a bunch of bookmarks on the top of my personal browser that I use for, okay, click on this, read the latest, click on that, read the latest, click on that, read the latest, and so on. And so things like Java Insider and things like, InfoQ.com and Reddit and whatever, there's always something, and of course, spring.io/blog, right? Where I write all the time. So that's one of the things I do to manage my time to get better. And the other is to teach. Like I said, I write a blog every Tuesday I'm not kidding. I've never missed one. If I'm on a plane going to India for 17 hours or going to Singapore or whatever for 17 hours, and I'm going to be weird time zones, I'll just pre-publish it. I'll schedule it to be published on Tuesday or whatever. Or if I'm in like let's say I'm in Singapore and I'm now in the next, or I'm in Australia. It's tomorrow already. It's Wednesday in Australia, but maybe maybe it's Tuesday in Australia, which means that it's like Monday for most of the rest of the world, right? Okay, fine. I'll publish it Tuesday, but Australian time, right? Whatever. I always publish it on Tuesday. If it's as long as it's Tuesday for me, wherever I am. And that goes, I've never missed one. That's been there for, we started the first week of 2011, January 2011. So every year since then. So and that it's like a Richard Sorota's reading list, but not on a daily basis, just once a week. But it's very valuable for me because it forces me to find 10, 15 interesting articles that I really like and I want to share, or that have a lot of possibility. What else?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
that's it. This week in spring. That's very useful.
Yeah, I just want to ask you something that's very interesting to me.
Yes,
because
sir.
you mentioned that you've been consistent since 2011.
Yeah.
That's a long time being consistent. You didn't miss posting any article every Tuesday since
Tuesday.
2011.
January. Yep. I guess it's 14 years and some change now, but almost 15. Yeah.
Wow. How do you keep this level of consistency for so many years?
That's just it. The consistent, because it's not, my dad said, I have two dads, I have my biological father, and then I have my mom's husband, who has become, he's amazing. He's my second dad, just a wonderful person. Both of my dads are amazing. My first one, my late father, he said, this won't make any sense to people outside of the country, outside of the United States, it's using freedom units. It's a cinch by the inch, hard by the yard, which means like it's easy by the centimeter, but it's hard by the meter, right? It's more difficult by the meter. So basically, if you do something and you do it a little bit all the time, it's easy. So you update your software and keep it up to the latest dependencies. It's easy if you do it every 6 months. It's painful if you wait 2 years, right? If you want to learn something, it's easy if you do a little bit of it every day. But if you wait until 2 years and then you learn, you'll never catch up. Right? It's cinch by the inch, hard by the yard. Do a little bit every day and you can get amazing results. You're investing in your own brain, right? And I try to do that. I'm not Venkat, nobody's Venkat, but I try to invest every day a little bit in my own brain. And ironically, I'm not really great at saving money, but I am very good at saving up knowledge a little bit every day. I save up money. I'm just saying, like, you'd think that I would apply that lesson. The thing I've prioritized is every day save up a little bit of new knowledge.
Wow. So, and how do you manage staying consistent on life adversities? Because, sometimes life will happen, like, I don't know, could be like something related to health, could be something related to family, could be something related to work. I don't know. There's so many things that can happen. And sometimes it's really hard to be consistent when those difficult things happen. So how do you do to keep this consistency for so many years during life adversities?
Well, like I said, if you do a little bit every day, then by the time every day I'm bookmarking or I'm reading these things. So by the time Tuesday comes, I don't have to go read everything on the internet. I just go through my bookmarks and go, okay, add that to the list, add that, write up a little description, and it's half an hour each week now. But it's only because I've done the work for the last 7 days that it's not a big deal. Cinch by the inch, hard by the yard. But sometimes, you're right, sometimes life is very much in your way. And for example, I also do a podcast every Thursday without fail since 2016 or 18, I forget, right?
Wow.
And so that podcast, I have a new person from the community on the podcast, and I've had, lots of people. We should have you on the show. We haven't had you on the show yet.
Oh,
but
I would be delighted.
The pleasure and the honor would be mine. But we have lots of people on the show, and we talk about Java, Spring, and the adjacent communities. Messaging and cloud and integration, security, and all these are like continuous delivery, DevOps. All these things are. If you need to know Spring, you need to know these other things as well. And so it's a very long running series, but sometimes you just don't feel like putting out a podcast. I've been in hospital many times over the last 15 years doing this job because I've gone overseas and gotten pneumonia or something, or gotten, allergic reaction or whatever. I've been very ill on planes. I've been, people would be shocked by just how many times I've been stuck in a hotel room, unable to breathe, because the asthma plus a flu or something like that. It's just the nature of being on the road, and obviously my doctor is very good. I have a very good doctor at home who helps me and all that. So sometimes you just don't feel like putting out an episode. So like I say, the good thing is I record the episodes like you are. You're recording this, but you're not going to publish it just yet. I record the episodes and I have a bank of them. And then when it's actually time to get it out, I just put in an intro and I put the description, I publish it. It's quick. So I record when I can and I publish when I need to. So it's a much easier pull model that way. But sometimes, even with all that preparation and automation and consistency, even there, sometimes it's difficult. And the hardest week for me was my late father passed away in December of 2019. And that week's podcast was not about technology. I just talked about my dad. That's the only one where it was not, there's nothing Spring related per se, but I don't care. It was still one of my favorite episodes.
Wow. That's such an example, such an amazing level of consistency. And, that's the biggest secret to stay up to date with technologies, because sometimes we wait so much and then it gets hard, like you say.
Yeah. It's not hard. Just start it today and keep doing it. And before you know it, it'll be a week and then a month and then a year. And you're like, oh, hey, somebody asked me a question. I know the answer. Let me help. It's really good for you.
And what is your strategy to start writing articles? Because many developers, many, top speakers and references say that we should focus on something when we are sharing our knowledge.
Yeah.
What is your strategy? For example, if you want to learn something cool that's not necessarily your focus, how do you do this balance? Do you have a focus? Obviously, you have the focus of Spring, but how do you balance this focus with the things you want to learn?
Again, yeah, you've got to have an eye on the horizon. You want to be able to see where you're going to go to, and then work backwards from there, right? If you write an article without having I want the last paragraph of my article to be written first, because then I know what I'm trying to teach them and how I get to that. And then from there, you write an outline, maybe do a mind map first, like we talked about earlier. Mind maps help you see relationships that help you understand or infer structure and hierarchy, which is very useful when teaching, because you can start with the biggest concepts and then drill down to the depth of the more concrete topics. And then you put that outline together. And from there, it kind of writes itself. I write the outline, and then next to the bullet pointer of what I want to cover at that particular place in the article, I also have a little description of the code that maybe I want to show at that place in the article. And then you go back and put it in another doc side by side, outline, another doc, start writing the text that speaks to those bullet points. And from there, you just need to write out, you're just a GVT model at that point. You just write text, just generate the text based on the prompt. And the next thing you know, you've got an article. And the nice thing is, if you have an article with enough code in it and enough concepts and enough basics in there, it can be 10, 20, 30 pages. Now you've got yourself a chapter if you wanted it to be. Just keep doing that 10 more times. You've got yourself a book,
Or you have a talk.
Yeah, well, that's true. Talks are easier work than that. Yeah. But yeah, a chapter, that could be a good book. Yeah, totally.
Could be a talk, could be a course, could be a book. There's so many things we can do with articles. That's so powerful.
Perfectly said, sir. Well said. Yes, 100%.
Besides technical stuff, Josh, what are your favorite hobbies or fun in San Francisco? Because there are so many things to do, right? So imagine so many possibilities. Imagine it's a beautiful city, amazing. There's so many things to do, beautiful restaurants.
Yeah, what do I mean, I love traveling, obviously. I'm on the road all the time. I love the world. I think the world's interesting. I like to learn languages, obviously. That's, communication is really good. I have become obsessed with this video game called Elden Ring.
I love it.
It's very good.
I finished it, but I didn't download it. I didn't download the expansion yet. The DLC, yeah. I need to do that.
I don't know, for people who are in the audience who don't know about it, Elden Ring is a video game from a company called FromSoft. And FromSoft is a studio in Japan that makes these games called Dark Souls. And they've defined a bit of an industry niche. It's its own kind of game. It's an RPG, but it's called a Souls-like game. So if you build a game in the style of these Dark Souls games, they're called Souls-like, right? And these games are famous for being difficult. And the reason they're difficult is because they're not actually difficult, but they require you to do some work. They require you to struggle. You cannot just go in there and press the button a few times and win. It will not work. You have to develop skill. So there's two ways to win. You can either develop the muscle reflex and the physical dexterity to defeat these boss characters, or you can develop the knowledge, which allows you to circumvent a lot of their ferocious attacks. You develop the knowledge and build up your character so that you have defense and offensive magics maybe, or whatever. You can do all these things to make your character very strong or very capable against this other character. Even if you're not able to fight them one-on-one, you're not able to dodge and roll and weave and all that, you can still destroy that character. Okay, so two paths, both of which require multiple hours of work. Very few people can wander into this game, find one of these bosses, and then beat them on the first try. Almost impossible. Whereas almost everybody can probably beat the first several levels of a new Mario Brothers game first try, right? There's a difference there. Mario Brothers is meant to be for everybody. Yeah. Most people will get the credits to roll on Mario Brothers, right? You may not get the Star World, you may not get that or this, but you'll get the basics. And most games are built like Mario Brothers. Most people will finish most games. But Souls games are different. It's not meant for most people. It's meant for the people that are willing to try hard, But the feeling that you get when you beat it is unbelievable. It's very satisfying. Yeah. You do some work and the investment pays off, People struggle, but it's a good feeling to know that you did it, And I believe that life is a little bit about like Dark Souls, If you put in a little bit of work, more than a little, you put in work and you struggle, there's good that comes of it. There's a very good feeling. The accomplishment is much better than if it was just done for you,
Yeah.
And
so I quite like that. Yeah, Dark Souls, Elden Ring are games for the challengers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it when it's easy, but I'm just saying there's something very satisfying about doing it the old-fashioned way, the hard way, learning, And so I like those styles of games. I'm not very good at them. I've been playing it obsessively since it came out. Elden Ring and all the other Souls games I've played them, but I'm still not very good at it. But I just like the challenge. It's like Sudoku. You're never done with Sudoku. There's always
it's so challenging. I remember that in Dark Souls 3, there was that secret dragon boss. It's huge. I think it's a blue dragon. I don't remember exactly the name, but what's the name?
Meteor?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very weird to find him. Like I would have to, I think, wear a special clothes, like to, I think, get transformed into a ghost and then go to a ladder, and then I would climb this ladder, and then I would find that ridiculously difficult dragon. And I think I died with my character more than 50 times.
Easily, no problem. He's one of the hardest. He's a horrible boss to fight. So that's another thing about the Dark Souls games. Even though all of them are difficult, the optional ones, the ones that you do not have to beat to finish the game, are the most difficult. They're there for people like you and me who want the extra challenge,
Yeah, like I remember.
I wouldn't have to do it.
I will kill this boss no matter what. And, I did it after, trying more than 50 times.
Did you drink some wine or celebrate? I mean, it's...
Yeah, I should have, probably.
Yeah. Those games are, yeah.
But like even in Elden Ring, there was the last boss, which was the lady. I forgot her name.
Oh, Millennia. Yeah, she's
Millennia.
But optional. She's optional. You don't have to fight that boss. But for people who don't know, this is considered the hardest boss of all the FromSoft Souls-like games, and it is very difficult. Like her character is both when she hits you, it is very strong, so it takes away a large chunk of your health bar. She's also super fast, so she can move around the arena very quickly, so you can't outpace her. And she has a large area of effect, so when she does an attack, that attack can spread across the whole arena as well. So if you're up close and fighting, close quarters, if she lands a hit on you, she'll destroy you in a few hits. She's also super fast, so it doesn't take any time at all for her to destroy you. And also she's super, she can stand here and get you from way over there. Oh, and also even worse, when she hits you, your health bar goes down, but her health bar goes back up. So she gets stronger and healthier the harder that she hits you. It's just an incredibly hard boss. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember on this one I struggled a lot. So I don't remember if it was as much as I did with this dragon,
Yeah.
but it was extremely hard, both bosses. It's insane.
It's very painful. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a good game though. Both of those are good games. I totally recommend it to people that be like me though, right? Don't be like Raphael here. If you've got almost no hair, you should play these games, right? Because you can say goodbye to the last few of them and you won't miss it, right? But if you're like Raphael and you've got a full head of hair, then maybe don't play these games because you'll pull it all out and you'll be like, oh.
Yeah, just be careful to not break your controller.
Yes.
I remember another very insanely hard boss was in the Final Fantasy remake. I played the last one, and there was the bosses, there was the summons. I would fight the summons, and I would have to use a very specific strategy with Aerith. If you don't know who is Aerith,
I know.
He's a character from the Final Fantasy VII game, and she casts spells and is very strong. So anyway, I have to use a specific strategy. I think it's Aerith, Cloud, and I don't. Maybe it was Tifa. I don't remember. But I had to depend on luck to beat this boss. Like it was, I think that was the very last boss, and the last boss on this, it's a bonus as well because it's so hard.
Right.
It's Sephiroth in the end.
Wow.
And it's insane. I don't know if you ever reached at this point on Final Fantasy Remake, but
I haven't played it. I should.
Yeah, if you do reach to this point, try it. You're gonna love it because if you love challenge,
Yeah.
but just keep in mind that you're gonna depend a little bit on luck.
Oh, of course.
Because it's so hard. It's so hard that one hit from Sephiroth, it would die.
Oh, yeah. So, see, this is what I love about the Dark Souls games is that if you go into these bosses and you are unprepared, a lot of them have very diverse move sets and it can feel random, right? It feels like RNG, random number generator, right? So it means you don't know why you're getting hit now instead of later or earlier or whatever. But there are people out there that have developed strategies so that they call them scripting the boss. So they can get the boss to do an attack. And if that boss does this attack, you can force the boss to do an attack. And then from there, you have a guaranteed punish window. You can retaliate, right? And so you can actually script the fight. You can actually, as long as and it's very like chess, you can force these characters into a certain path of their logic where they have to do a certain thing, and then from there you can defeat them without any RNG, no luck. You just follow the steps in your notes, in your script. But it's the best players can do that. Some people are so good that they can do that and never get hit by anybody in the whole game. They start a brand new game, go all the way to the credits, and take no damage at all, no hit, no nothing. That's what I want to do one day. Is like that. I think the only thing harder than that would be like no hitting enterprise Java, do enterprise Java without ever taking a single hit,
Yeah, but sometimes I'm a little bit suspicious of those guys who create those videos. And I suspect they use some tool where they can save every single moment of the boss fight. And then
so
if they take a hit, they can go back a little bit and then try again from that point. Because if they try the whole fight with the boss, it's so hard. I think they would spend at least, 1 month to do a perfect battle.
They do. So one of my favorites, he streams everything live. And so you can see he's got very complex tools that he uses to look at the geometry of the boss. You can see the hitboxes, the regions, and all that. You can see the area that will be impacted by the AoE, the attack, area of effect attack. You can see all this stuff. You can see the geometry, the polygons around the boss model, and around the characters, and you can see how things impact different stats and all that. So he has a very scientific approach to like understanding and memorizing and learning these fights, these boss fights, these encounters. So then when he does the actual thing, he'll do it live with no tools, no nothing enabled. Now he's doing it he's practiced. He's practiced over months online. You can watch him on his stream. He's practiced all of these fights 1,000 times. And then finally, in the very beginning, he's taking all the hits, but after half an hour, almost no hits. And then after a day, maybe almost no hits at all, but there's still a little RNG. And then after a month, there's not even RNG. He's figured out ways to defeat that, So then finally he does the actual run, and he does it all live. So you can watch him go from 0 and then go to the finest, see the credits. And some of these people are so good that they've done it dozens of times now with different, this time I'll be a magic character. This time I'll be a sword character. This time I'll use whips. This time I'll use whatever, It's amazing. Like, it's just the variety and and each kind of character, you go to different parts of the game because you want to build up your character to make it stronger. So you have to replenish certain things or add to certain things, and they are different parts of the map.
Yeah, it's a full-time job because it's so much work to get to no hit. I remember when I was fighting those Valkyries from God of War Ragnarok.
Right?
It is so difficult. It is insane. And I remember I watched a video on YouTube from someone killing the Valkyrie without taking any hit.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it. I was thinking, this person probably has a special tool, because how this person wouldn't take any hit at all.
I have no idea. That's incredible to me.
Have you finished God of War Ragnarok?
Yes. Yeah. My partner Tammy and I played that one. That was good. That's a very good game. I like that game a lot, and it's very story driven, so I like that as well.
Yeah, killing the Valkyrie is so difficult. Very good. And my final question to you, Josh, is about what career lessons would you like to share with the Java Challengers audience?
Oh, I guess it's just a summary of all the stuff we talked about, right? Do open source to open your network. Use communication and empathy to better communicate with those people in your network. Do a little bit every day to build towards a larger outcome, a better outcome. And, keep at it. Don't give up.
Very good. Josh Long, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have you here. And I learned so much. I'm pretty sure that Java Challengers audience also learned a lot. So many lessons, so many insights. Thank you so much for being here, Josh.
Obrigado. Thank you, my friend. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Bye.